This is the second in this meeting, which we've called Cultural Resistance in Palestine. We have a really impressive lineup of guests, and they will brief us on the inspiring but challenging business of resisting occupation, displacement, and apartheid through cultural practice. Please let me introduce our first speaker, who is Heba Zaphiriou-Zarifi, who is the chair of PAL Music. PAL Music are the UK ambassadors for the Edward Said National Conservatory of Music in Palestine, which provides musical education of the highest quality to young Palestinians. Heba is a psychologist by trade, and she consults on mental health projects in the Middle East. She's also a patron of Medical Aid for Palestine, MAP, which does amazing work in Gaza and elsewhere. And I'm pleased to say that Brighton and Hove PSC makes regular donations to MAP on behalf of its members. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Heba has campaigned extensively for justice and peace for the Palestinian people. Great pleasure to welcome you, Heba.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. I would like to start my talk by thanking Brighton-Palestine Connect for their support of Palestinian rights and their solidarity with the Palestinian people. Thank you for inviting me to speak alongside Mahmoud, Hossam, Jamal, and Jonathan, whose messages I'm very eager to hear. Apart from being a pleasure to share the panel with you, I consider this coming together first and foremost as an act of sumud, an expression of steadfastness in the face of colonialist power that has forcibly split us apart, with Mahmoud under occupation, Hossam and Jamal under siege, and me living in exile as a Briton. Also, I wish to thank Jonathan for being a friend to the Palestinians, and wish to thank the audience for your presence tonight as active witnesses to the struggle Palestinians endure to keep their culture alive. Thank you. On a day like today, on the 29th of October, 1948, the massacre of Al-Dawaimi village took place, as well as the massacre of Qasr al-Qasim, which occurred on the 29th of October, 1956. I wish to mark these acts of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians by remembering the victims and show support to their descendants. Thank you. Writing about Palestinian cultural resistance, Mahmoud says, stripped of their rights, the last wall of Palestinian resistance is culture. Hossam adds in a poignant poem, every wall is the same. As I took time to consider these stark verities, mulling over their meaning and how they impact our relation to homeland, I had a dream, which I would like to share with you as an entry point to our discussion regarding Palestinian culture, its destruction and theft as a weapon of war, or an extension of war by other means. Allow me to give a little theoretical context to the genesis of dreams. Some dreams spring from the personal unconscious. Others emerge from the deeper pool of the collective unconscious, thus revealing a message about and for the collective at large. Dreams come to us for many reasons, but always with a purpose, often enticing us to reconsider what has been thrust into denial, injured by indifference, or buried in amnesia. Dreams are impartial, spontaneous products of the unconscious psyche, outside the control of the will. They show us the unvarnished, natural truth. I believe this dream is one of those unvarnished truths, offering us an image of the collective suffering we face as Palestinian culture is being defaced. I dream I am a pilgrim, going on a pilgrimage to a place I know well, but seeking to reclaim it. I follow meandering corridors leading to a room tiled with mosaics set in geometric designs of traditional Islamic art with colors of deep blue and white, green and red, with floral vegetation patterns and birds. I recognize it. It is the wellspring in my grandfather's house in Al-Quds, Jerusalem. I look around searching for the water. Where has the water gone? I'm shocked and horrified. There's no water running. The wellspring used to be lush green with plenty of water flowing, but now it is dry and dusty. I wake up with a deep sense of loss and grief. I have entitled the dream, The Stolen Water of Palestine. Culture is the water of life for a people and a nation. It draws us to the source of who we are and where we come from. Culture is the vehicle of identity and the manifestation of its becoming across the ages. Like a cradle, it connects us to our ancestral lineage, whilst outlining pathways for future generations. It roots the past into the present, enabling a continuity of identity to flow into the future. Cultural traditions act as containers for religious and secular practices, facilitating rituals and rites of passage, whilst enabling the transmission of their symbolic meanings. Culture is the common reservoir filtered down through time with a repetitive recurrence to reaffirm and consolidate what is, while simultaneously renewing and adapting to the evolving spirit of the times. Culture is both fixed and moving. It is simultaneously body and spirit. For Palestinians, culture and its traditions are the water that washes the pain away. It is needed in healing trauma, which in our case, I'd rather refer to it as existential suffering rather than trauma per se. Culture supports us in enhancing psychological resilience against the violent attacks on our identity. For all these reasons and beyond, culture must be protected and preserved as a treasure, even more so when a nation is under a settler colonialist regime. For culture is the antidote to fragmentation exacted by the colonizer on the colonized. The enforced exodus of Palestinians, as well as the continuous goading to uproot them, threatens cultural preservation and transmission. Culture is to people what water is to land. Even when water is used as a weapon against West Bank Palestinians or turned into humanitarian crisis in Gaza, culture springs water for the sustenance of the soul. Several times Palestinians have been made refugees outside and inside their own homeland, risking the dissolution of their connection to their culture, yet every effort is invested into holding on to their culture and rootedness to their land as to life itself. The etymology of the word culture comes from the Latin cultura, which means to cultivate and to inhabit, gleaning that culture is rooted in the land we cultivate and in the locus we inhabit. Ruthlessly severing the Palestinian people from their land is a crime Israel will have to address at some point in its future. For even when militarism crushes people's yearning for peace and buries their history into oblivion, or indeed pounds their hope of al-Auda, of returning home to their homeland, the longed-for tidal wave of justice will rise at some point in history, and hope and history will rhyme, as poet Seamus Heaney says. Culture is the crux, where the vertical axis of tangible heritage meets the horizontal axis of intangible traditions, both manifesting fundamental structures of cultural identity. In active malevolence, Israel has devoured Palestine out of her land and out of her history, now expanding its hegemony by consuming and exploiting Palestinian culture, wrecking it utterly to make believe it never existed. Hundreds of archaeological sites have been looted and plundered during the last 72 years of Israeli colonialism, resulting in the illegal trade of Palestinian cultural property. Falsifying is another way of stealing Palestinian heritage by manipulating facts to create fake historical narratives. Of the 22 civilizations that form the rich fabric of Palestinian archaeology, Israel is determined to make a gigantic leap, crossing out every other civilization that has inhabited or cultivated this land in order to link 21st century Zionism with biblical times, as though the Bible is a historic text rather than a religious scripture. The Judaization of Palestine is a monolithic project. It reduces diversity and the rich Palestinian historical and cultural fabric to a simplistic, uniform, false self with Jewish-only vestiges. Israeli archaeology has turned Palestinian land to ruins. What Israelis do not seem to fathom is how corrosive this falsehood is to the soul, ours, theirs, and that of the land. The Palestinian Authority's Department of Antiquities and Cultural Heritage has confirmed that more than 500 archaeological sites and more than 1,500 landmarks have been stolen or demolished. The Israeli army is allowed a free hand to devastate heritage sites, as it has already done in Akka, Acre, Jaffa, Tabariya, Tiberias, Al-Quds, Jerusalem, Al-Khalil, Hebron, Bethlehem, Nablus, and other cities. None have been spared. The Jewish state seeks to eradicate any reference to the indigenous people of Palestine, whitewashing their forgery by using any desperate means possible. From the intangible Palestinian cultural traditions, I will name but a few: education, language, Hakawati storytelling, cuisine, song, music, dance, all the Palestinian arts and crafts, such as ceramics, glass blowing, olive wood carving, basketry, Nablus soap making, and of course, Palestinian embroidery, most recently avidly sought after by an Israeli fashion brand who, I quote, bring Palestinian embroidery to the world's top stores, as though Palestinians need Israeli designers to traffic Palestinian embroidery worldwide. Whilst Israel shows a humanitarian cooperation initiative to the naive of this world, Palestinian embroiderers are exploited as workers under the dominion of a potentate controlling their freedom, so they never reach those markets directly. Similar to the theft of tangible Palestinian properties, the intangibles of Palestinian culture are equally endangered, as Israelis label them as their own. I would like to remind everyone, despite what you find in London's Israeli restaurants, that falafel is Palestinian. So is maftoul, musakhan, ma'loube, and idri. Usurping Palestinian food or devouring it and devouring its identity only makes the hollow belly of envy more painfully ravenous and the appetite for its cravings more excruciatingly voracious. I also would like to reclaim the Palestinian dabke as our traditional dance, and the ataba, dal'una, mijana, and saja are part of our Middle Eastern musical traditions. The folk song, Ya Zarif Atul, celebrated throughout the Middle East, calls for the handsome migrant to return to his homeland and to his beloved. Lastly, the overarching of all traditions is Palestinian hospitality. Welcoming the newcomer is a long-standing tradition in Palestine. Even when the host has been displaced, or perhaps even because of their homelessness, Palestinian hospitality is unconditionally hospitable. Founded in 1993, the Edward Said National Conservatory of Music has been a lighthouse to Palestinian culture, forming a hub to East and West musical integration, providing a home to thousands of talented music students and inspirational teachers, as well as housing several orchestras. The Student Orchestra, followed by the Palestine Youth Orchestra, founded in 2004, and the Palestine Strings in 2009. Some of the more advanced musicians have joined the Palestine National Orchestra, established in 2011. This orchestra gathers professional musicians from Palestine and from the Palestinian diaspora with the view of establishing a permanent professional orchestra in Palestine. As the chair of Palm Music UK, Friends of the Edward Said National Conservatory, I commend the integrity of its director, teachers, and staff, as well as the conservatory's stamina and long-standing commitment to preserve and transmit Arabic classical music, as well as dialoguing with and teaching Western classical music. We continue to celebrate the musical renaissance that has flourished in Palestine through the Edward Said National Conservatory and other Palestinian cultural organizations as a testimony to Palestinian cultural enrichment. To the attempted genocide of Palestinian culture, we propose a struggle fed by the love of life, love of the arts, love of beauty, and to quote Suhail Khoury, love of Beethoven. In July 2020, cultural leaders in East Jerusalem were detained, including the Director General of the Edward Said National Conservatory of Music, Suhail Khoury, and his wife, Rania Ilyas, Director of the Yabous Cultural Center. In the early hours of the morning, a squad of Israeli police entered their home in Beit Hanina, Jerusalem. Their children were ordered to stay put in a room while the police searched their bedroom and confiscated their passports, documents, personal computers, phones, and car. The Al-Quds Jerusalem Conservatory's branch was ransacked and its data, files, and computers seized. The conservatory provides musical education and performance for children from the age of 5 onward, and the Yabous Center creates a stage from which different cultural traditions of Palestine are celebrated. Additionally, Israeli forces wreaked havoc in the home of Dawood Al-Ghul, director of Shafa, Jerusalem Arts Network. These acts of violence against Palestinian culture in Jerusalem were described by a journalist as part of a campaign of harassment and intimidation of Palestinians by the Israeli government. Needless to say that attacking one of us is a suffering caused to all of us. Hanan Ashrawi, a member of the PLO's executive committee, stated, "The raid by Israeli forces of various Palestinian cultural centers in occupied Jerusalem is the latest in a long history of targeting everything Palestinian in our occupied capital. Israel's violent and systematic campaign against Palestinians in occupied Jerusalem aims to erase the Palestinian presence and alter the demographic and cultural makeup of the city." End of quote. An open letter penned by more than 60 members of Artists for Palestine called on the British government to condemn these acts on Palestinian culture, and I quote, "These attacks threaten to extinguish cultural life for thousands of artists, students, and people in wider society." One signatory said, "These raids are part of a new series of assaults on Palestinian lives designed to break the morale and deny Palestinian people the last thing they own, their culture." I'm very disheartened to say there was no reply from the government to this letter. But the British Council in Jerusalem stated on social media that the Council is a long-standing partner of all 3 cultural centers which support music and culture for young people and preserves Palestinian cultural identity and community in Jerusalem. Composer and director of the National Conservatory of Music, Suhail Khoury, who was arrested during the raids, issued a statement urging friends of Palestinian cultural institutions in Jerusalem, quote, "to demand the Israeli authorities lift their foot off our neck so that we can sing in freedom." There are decisive moments in history that cannot and will not be erased. And however hard we try to eliminate or disregard them as irrelevant, they come back to haunt us like ghosts who will not rest until we give them their dues. The 1948 Nakba, with its continuous ramification in other forms of violence against Palestinian cultural, civic, human, and political rights, is one of these indelible moments in history, where blatant crimes against humanity are perpetrated with impunity. However much the Israeli state denies the criminalities inflicted on Palestinians or smothers them into denial, the Nakba is and will always remain a thorn in the flesh of its establishment. And the ongoing Nakba exacted on what remains of Palestine is a crime trapped in the body history of the Israeli state, and like a ghost will plague it without respite until the crime is recognized and redeemed. Following the assassination of George Floyd came the toppling of Edward Colston's effigy in Bristol. Likewise, the criminal victories of extermination on which the State of Israel has been erected will also be pulled down from the plinths of glory. Trophies of empire building are hollow, and however imposing they seem when erect, in reality, they are clanging tin of an immoral, oppressive power. This year, in 2020, thousands of people attended the demonstration in Bristol, one of many in the UK. And like a house of cards, the system that condoned the exploitation of others for its own glory is collapsing layer after layer. There will be no stopping the collective movement, consciously defying injustice and racism. Black Lives Matter, and it's only a matter of time before we hear how Palestinian lives matter, hailed by those who are on the side of peace with justice. Reducing the composite Palestinian historic identity into a monotone, unimorphous configuration is self-denying and ultimately damaging. Jacques Derrida would identify this condition as the worst of all violence, on which makes of more than one, simply one, and out of multiplicity, a one-sided unilateral sovereignty. Palestinians are fully encased, encircled by Israeli roads, settlement, checkpoints, armed forces, and watchtowers, but they are also controlled under the surface as their aquifers are drained out with the vast majority of water filling Israeli tanks. The average amount per capita for Palestinians, according to studies, is the lowest in the world. To conclude, I would like to return to where I started, with the image of water, symbolizing culture as the womb of a civilization to which we turn to for regeneration and renewal. Water, like culture, is what binds us together and connects us not only to a physical location, but also to the spirit, which revives it. Water binds me to your name, says Mahmoud Darwish in a poem about exile. Water indeed binds us to ourselves and to each other in a physical, spiritual cohesion. Without water, there will be no us. Going on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to discover there is no water left is indicative. Like a house divided against itself, Jerusalem has become the pilgrim's destination, seeking yet not finding what they seek. Occupation metastasizes not just the body of the colonized, but also that of the colonizer. It swallows whatever it captures. Israel has created facts on the ground, not knowing Palestinians are the facts, who will not disappear, nor their culture appropriated. Like water, earth does not belong to us, we belong to her. And what remains of her in us is the water, the culture we inhabit and embody as the emblem of our existence. There is water because there is still rain, because there is still redemption, and because there is still a Palestinian song singing about who we are and about exile and belonging. Here is a song I would like to share with you as a symbol of our identity. It sings about the love we have for our olive tree, whose silvery leaves quiver like water. And it says, we are the olive tree, and we are her branches. We bend our foreheads only to kiss the earth. The land is ours, and the country is ours. Sing, O nightingale, sing for the love of the olive tree. Thank you. And here's the song.
غرد يا بلبل عزتون بلادنا وغرد يا بلبل عزتون بلادنا جبل القفز نادى أعجب الزيتون خلوا نار حب الوطن زيتون نحنا بالأرض أغصان زيتون نحني بس لنبوس الترايب ياب الأرض إلنا والبلاد بلادنا والأرض إلنا والبلاد بلادنا على دلعونا وعلى دلعونا زيتون بلادي أطيب ميتونا على دلعونا وعلى دلعونا زيتون بلادي أطيب ميتونا زيتون بلادي واللوز الأخضر والميرامي ولا ننسى الزعتر وكراس العجل لما تتحمر أطيب طعمتها بزيت الزيتون على دلعونا وعلى دلعونا زيتون بلادي أطيب ميتونا خبزي ملتوت وجبني طرية وأكل الدفينة بيها الشتوية وصحون السحلب والهيطانية خلتنا ننسى بيض كانونا على دلعونا وعلى دلعونا زيتون بلادي أطيب ميتونا ويا رب تشكي ونلبس طاقية نلبس كبوت ونحمل شمسية ونغني سوا يا فلسطينية وعلى دلعونا وعلى دلعونا زيتون بلادي أطيب
Heba, thank you so much for your inspiring talk. There was so much to take in and so many complex and inspiring ideas. Many thanks indeed. And I know that people have questions they want to put to you, and not least because you are conveying to us the atrocities that have been perpetrated on your comrades in Palestine. Many thanks indeed for that. Our next speaker, comrades, is Mahmoud Muna. It's a particular pleasure, I have to say, to welcome Mahmoud back to Brighton, if only virtually. Many of us in Brighton Hove PSC got to know Mahmoud when he was a student here at Sussex University, and of course a stalwart comrade in BHPSC throughout his time in Brighton. Mahmoud was born in Jerusalem, and he and his family run the educational bookshop in Salahuddin Street, just up the road from Herod's Gate in East Jerusalem. It's a wonderful shop, as many of you know if you visited Jerusalem. Mahmoud is a regular contributor to the media on current affairs. His interests are in culture and identity and behaviors and language. Mahmoud writes for local and international cultural magazines and newspapers. Mahmoud, welcome back to Brighton, and we'll switch over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ben, and it is a real pleasure to be addressing some familiar faces, and I hope that soon we can meet in Jerusalem first and maybe in the UK. I still have a vivid memory of Brighton and the team who's been doing a great job, and I'm following up your work, and I could only say keep it up. We are closer and closer to the final line. It's also very hard to follow from beautiful presentation of Heba. It touched deep on the heart, both in warmth but also in sadness. I will try to share with you a little bit today about what does that mean for us here in Jerusalem, being one of 6 or 7 key players in culture activities here in Jerusalem. It is unfortunate, I should say, that the story in Jerusalem is probably different than the cultural battlefield in the West Bank or the cultural battlefield in Gaza or in the diaspora, because Israel has divided us and kind of cloned the conflict and the occupation differently to each one of us. So the cultural battlefield in Jerusalem is slightly different than the West Bank, and I'll take you into its status today and what's going on. Heba has mentioned the arresting of Suhail and Rania and Dawood a few months ago, and they are 2 of the key figures in Jerusalem cultural activities and leading 2 of the main cultural institutions in Jerusalem. Jerusalem currently, in addition to the music school run by Suhail and the Boost Culture Center run by Rania, it also hosts the Palestinian National Theater, a special place where we are proud of. So it's also there's a music school, so a multicultural center, and then there is a theater. There's also 2 art galleries in Jerusalem that are functioning, one for contemporary art and one for classic art. And there's the bookshop. And together, without neglecting other small organizations, together we form this umbrella in Jerusalem where we have this unwritten rule between us to enforce the Palestinian identity for Palestinians in East Jerusalem, which is basically being challenged, being harassed on a daily basis. Now, Israel may have succeeded in colonizing the land. They may have succeeded on occupying the people, and as I just said, dividing the people for sure. But they have not, and I hope they will not, be able to destroy the inner circle of us as a Palestinian, which is our identity. Our political identity today in Palestine is different. Of course, we vary across political lines, but we also, depending on our geographical areas, our immediate resistance kind of is different, from freedom of movement for the people in Gaza to some sort of economic and sense of freedom for the people in the West Bank, to a sort of equality within Israel for Palestinians who live within proper Israel, to a more confused way of struggle for Palestine in Jerusalem. That's kind of our political defragmentation, if you like, and a result of that. But our cultural identity is very strong. In fact, the only thing that brings all of us here on Zoom, the different speakers we have today, but also worldwide as Palestinians, is actually our cultural identity. We eat the same food, we dress the same way, we laugh in similar way, we make the same jokes, we celebrate death and weddings in similar way. Our music brings us together, our language brings us together, our art brings us together, and our literature, which is what I'm trying to add today to that plate, is also bringing us together. And that's what makes us all Palestinians. And I think Israel has identified from the very early days in 48 the importance of destroying the culture for the people that they're trying to colonize, to complete their colonization process. In fact, we may and we should not forget the 60,000 books that Israel have stolen from Palestinian house in the early days of the Nakba. 60,000 actual volumes were stolen from the nobility of the main cities in Jerusalem and Haifa and Nazareth, and main cities, Bethlehem, of course, in Palestine. And they are now residing in the National Library of Israel. The irony is they are in the basement of the Israeli National Library under the special marking, AAP, abandoned property. I think it should be stolen property, but they chose abandoned property. The irony is the foundation of the Israeli National Library, literally on the basement of the Israeli National Library, is the 60,000 books that they stole from the nobility of the main cities in Palestine. So they tried to basically confiscate this depth of culture presented in books, in this case, from the Palestinians in very early days. And then, of course, after that, the story continued, and Heba mentioned few, with the food, with the embroidery. Now the last victim of Israeli appropriation is za'atar, marketed as Israeli spice. And of course, hummus have been the first. The irony is Israeli can't actually pronounce hummus. So, and actually they also downgraded the language Arabic to become a language of special status in Israel, which will not enable them or will not help them even being able to pronounce the word hummus. So, you know, it's the irony again, stealing something and call it yours when you actually can't even pronounce it correctly. That's the case on few items that Israel is trying to do. Za'atar is another one of them. Now, in addition to that, and Heba had done a very good job in explaining that, what I wanted to provoke to you a little bit today in Jerusalem in the coming few minutes before I hand over is the importance of culture, not just on the level of preserving or protecting the Palestinian identity, which is very clear and it's clear in every case. And in fact, do I dare saying Jewish people should know that better? I mean, protecting the culture and preserving the culture through the catastrophes and the miseries that they have went through in history should tell them. That's actually, this is what the last coat that people will warm themselves with in hardship. And it's very, very, very difficult to take away that coat from people, and Palestinians are not an exception in that case. We will glue ourselves to culture in the most strongest of ways, and will not allow anyone to take it off yet, because it is the last layer what we have actually. But we can argue if even it is possible to strip people from their culture. I argue that probably is actually, with few exceptions in history, it's almost impossible to do that, and I hope the Palestinians will prove that. Now, I want to take you back to Jerusalem and speak about leadership. This is the fancy word that everyone's like to talk about. So let's look at leadership in Jerusalem. Historically, leadership in Jerusalem have stemmed from three areas. Either a leader that has a what do you call religious status, so come from the religious establishment, or people who come from the social status, the family, if you like, and so on. And these two cases, if you look at Palestinian leaders, the most notable in Jerusalem, of course, is Faisal Husseini, for example. He's come from a decent family, from the nobility of Jerusalem, and so on. And he also was the grandson of a religious cleric as well. So these two institutions, the religious institution and the social institution, the family and the clans and the tribes and so on. And the third one was the political institution. The political institutions operated in Jerusalem up until recent years. And they also gave away, if you like, leaders, or they produced leaders. Since the second Intifada, Israel has actually closed the political institutions in Jerusalem, mainly Fatah, with the closure of the Orient House again, but also closed a lot of other political institutions or affiliated political institutions, women organizations, youth clubs, and so on, that were serving under political umbrellas. And the pretext for that in the second Intifada, that these institutions will mobilize people and they have a risk over the security of the state of Israel. So they closed the political institution. That also was coupled with the emergence of Ramallah as the de facto, I hate to say the word, but de facto capital of Palestine, or the Palestinian Authority. So a lot of political elites have immigrated to Ramallah. And since then, we don't have any functioning political parties in Jerusalem, and therefore there's no political leaders stemming out or coming from the political institution in Jerusalem. It also went around religious institutions, mostly, of course, Christians and Muslims, who are around the mosque and around the churches, and actually instructed the clerics and the priests not to interfere in politics, quote unquote, that the word that was used, to deliver their sermons in Sunday. How to wash your hands, what is fine to eat, what is not, when and how, and so on. And religion have lost this connection to the way of life for Palestinians living under occupation. So we actually don't have any more leaders coming from religious institutions. The third institution, if you like, which we also had leaders coming out from, is the patriarchal, with all my criticism, a patriarchal society, the clan, the tribe. A certain part of Jerusalem was inhabited by a certain family, and the head of that family will become a leader, or the headmaster of a certain school of some sort coming from the community will become a leader. Now we also a lot changing now in the socio-economic, and I think people who are more rich probably more important than people who are wise, or they are old, or have contributed to the community, or so on. This is the unfortunate of the 21st century. So what I'm getting to, and I hope you're still with me, is that like the three areas where potentially Palestinian leaders in Jerusalem, but I will argue Palestine-wise, would emerge, have actually closed. And therefore you look at Jerusalem today, and we've been living this for the last 15 years, and there are no leaders. There are no leaders in Jerusalem, which is causing us a lot of problems most of the times. Leaders doesn't happen to be a good word now, so actually sometimes not having a leader is a good thing. Looking at the UK and the US, for examples. But most of the time it wasn't good not to have leaders in Jerusalem for our political struggle. What I wanted to propose to you today, and for something for you to think about, is perhaps maybe, culture can be a way for Palestinians to develop leadership. The cultural leaders are, by their own nature, are close to the people, close to the pace, close to the issues of the people. They are aware of where they're coming from, the issues of their people, because that's what they're addressing it artistically. They're also creative, and they're also fresh, and they seem to think outside the box. And it is no surprise that tonight you wanted to speak about Palestine, and you came up with some cultural leaders from around Palestine to speak about Palestine. So actually, cultural leaders are leaders of their society. Of course, we don't have mandates, no one have elected us, and we should be careful about that. And most of us come from liberal, progressive kind of trends within society, which is arguably probably not the rest of the Palestinian community is. But nevertheless, we should not undermine the role of culture in also producing leadership for Palestine in time when we actually are lacking leadership in Palestine. And if we look at Palestinian history, cultural figures, I can tell you from the writing word, has contributed. Mahmoud Darwish and people like Hassan Kanafani and so on have contributed hugely to their political party on the left throughout the 70s and the 80s. And they reach a certain level within leadership. I mean, Mahmoud certainly was an important member of PLO as well. So beyond the importance of culture in protecting and preserving the Palestinian cause and promoting the Palestinian cause, I think it's also important for us Palestinians internally to also look at culture as a way, or as a forum, or as a mechanism to actually produce our fresh ideas or leaders in the future. And I think Israel know that as well. And that's precisely why action like Heba described a few months ago, these two cultural leaders were actually kidnapped from their house and was arrested. And they kept under close monitoring now. And this game of playing with culture and using culture, politicizing culture. One of the questions I received prior to this conference is if we can divide politics from culture, if culture can be not political. And I think it's a luxury. I mean, this is a concept in the West. I mean, this is a purely European concept that you can just do art. You could just go draw something and then allow people to imagine it and draw your own conclusion from it and have a nice feeling and then go home and it's finished. In the Middle East, in a colonized nation, we can't have that privilege. We do not, actually. I mean, I can recall a lecture that I did in the bookshop about Goethe theory of color. And within 5 minutes, we started to speak about Palestine and what do the colors of Palestine represent and what do they mean and so on. Because people don't care about theory of color for Goethe, but they do care about Palestine, about their lives. So they quickly politicized culture and art, and rightly so, to address issues to do with their life. So I'll leave you here, and I hope that I just kind of planted some idea there for you to think about and to play around, and perhaps we can engage with it more in questions. I hope that was useful, Pen.
Mahmoud, thank you so much. Again, a lot to think about, and it's wonderful to see that you haven't lost your provocative edge. There are lots of points of hope there. So I'm sure many of us will want to come back to you before you leave us this evening, but many thanks indeed. Okay, the final segment of of our event tonight is three comrades, two in Gaza, one in London, Hossam Madhoun, Jamal al-Rozzi, and Jonathan Chadwick. Hossam and Jamal are the founders and artistic directors of Gaza's Theatre for Everybody, and they coordinate drama and other therapy programs for traumatized children. Jonathan Chadwick is a theatre director and writer, currently director of As Theatre, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, As Theatre, working on experimental, international and community projects. You may know that the Al-Mishal Center was the only independent, fully equipped theatre venue in Gaza. It was destroyed by an Israeli airstrike on the 9th of August, 2018. Jonathan, Hossam, and Jamal will speak about their projects to rebuild Al-Mishal and perform The Emigrants, a play by Stanislav Mrazek, in a special Gaza adaptation. And I should just add that Brighton and Hove PSC was very pleased to make a donation towards the rebuilding of the Al-Mishal Center. So I'm going to hand over to the three of you as a kind of collective of theatre activists. And I think, Jamal, you will speak first. Jonathan has explained that he will pitch in as and when needed, but will leave the floor to Hossam and Jamal predominantly. And just to explain that both Jamal and Hossam will be identified, it's a long story, at the foot of their pictures as Hossam, but it's not two Hossams, it's Jamal and Hossam. Anyway, welcome to all three of you.
Welcome, dear friend. Thank you very much. Thanks for Brighton and Hove. Thanks for all the participants in this solidarity meeting. This is what gives us some extra hope and strength to go on and continue. Actually, Heba and Mahmoud did not leave us a lot to say. I was preparing something to tell, but I will shift. I will let you hear my own experience into theater and how it became a resistance tool in my life against the occupation. 38 years ago, I was still young. I was 18 years old. And I was still living in the camp of Nusayrat, which is like 10 kilometers from Gaza City to the south. And UNRWA had like a club there for the refugees in the camp. And I was young, going to the club, doing some activities. And one day, with a group of people, we thought that why not to make some theater? Theater, by the way, was not existing in the culture of the Palestinian, and especially in the camp, because the occupation, the people priorities, and other means. We started with the little experience, with zero experience, and we make our first show. And that night, I remember how the occupation soldiers was attacking the camp, the club of the camp, and arresting all of us, of course, throwing the knife and spreading all of the people, and then take us to the investigation. Why you are doing theater? I thought I was discovering actually that night how much theater and culture is very important tool as a resistance against the occupation. This investigation did continue, and we said we are just making theater. I mean, we were taking it very simply like that. They said, no, you have to take a license before. Of course, we did not take a license from the occupation to make some theater in our camp. Then another time, we used one of the anniversaries, like today, but today is like the anniversary of Muhammad's birthday. It's my birthday, by the way, today. And we use this this occasion to make our second show. Again, they were arresting us and then putting us in the jail after investigation and so on and so on and so on. I really discovered that, okay, as far as they are fighting this, then this is a very strong way to fight them back. But for the third time, we were really threatened that this will affect our life in a way or another. I was 18 years old, finishing my secondary school. I had an uncle living, by the way, in London that time, who was leaving Palestine in 1948. And he was making me invitation to come to London, preparing some kind of arrangement that I go to the university and so on, to see my life and to go on. I was asking a permission to go out of Gaza at that time, and I was totally refused. Of course, the investigation officer was reminding me that you were fighting us in a way or another, and now we can close in a way or another your chance to go to London. But if, you know, but if means if you cooperate with us. I have been prevented to go out of Gaza for 12 years. I lose the chance to go to London, and after that to go to Canada, because I was following a program of a study with Montreal College in Gaza. And in 1985, I was going to Ramallah. It was still open. Now it's totally closed since 20 years or more. In Ramallah, I was studying theater, coming back with a lot of energy, going to the Union of Labor in Gaza. It was still existing that time, and I was making another play. Again, it was attacked hardly, and this time strongly. Prison again, and then coming back. In 1988, we created the first group in Gaza. It was called Hanadil. And we had a play that time, and we were going with this play to al-Fahm, one of our cities inside 48. It was the first anniversary of the creation of Palestine after the announcement of Abu Ammar 1 year before. It was the second year of the Intifada. I remember how many kilometers we were running in the mountains, because we're in the base we were making this theater show. It was Urwa ibn al-Ward, something like that, yes. I remember how many kilometers we were running in the mountains, living, staying all the night between the trees and so on, and hardly we were able to come back to Gaza after. It was curfew in Gaza in that time. So slowly you discover that theater and culture is one of the good ways to resist the occupation. And we take it like that. And we insisted, they help us to discover this. And we still keeping it as something, beside that we love to do it. Beside that it is a space for us to to breathe and to explore ourselves and to bring people things. And as Heba said, it's like the oxygen of the life, the soul. We did the train and develop ourselves. We have a new techniques. We knew many people, including our best friend, Jonathan. we discovered that it is also a way of resistance, but not only the occupation, it is the conservatism, the racism, not only the Zionism. And we started to address a lot or many of the themes that can bring people messages. But also, which is very important, in Gaza, as a 2 million people living in a small piece, closed since more than 15 years, closed totally. We needed to fight this conservatism. Sorry for my language, for my English. At this time, we believe that theater is very much needed. Culture is very much needed in Gaza and Palestine, I mean, but in Gaza also, as we are living in this situation, within this critical political situation that we are facing, with all this going on in the world. I will leave the mic for Hossam to tell the most important thing that we wanted to say. Thank you.
حبيبي جمال يسعدك يا صاحبي يسعدك. Good evening, everybody. So, what to say? Is it really art a tool for resistance? Well, I will give you a little example. Did you saw the movie Schindler's List? It's a movie produced in 1993 and directed by Steven Spielberg, led by Liam Neeson and Ben Kingsley and many others. I regret that I didn't see it earlier. I saw it only last week for the first time. And it is, if most of you or all of you or not know, that it is talking about the genocide against the Jews during the Second World War by the Nazi. And this Schindler, Mr. Oscar Schindler, which played by Liam Neeson, was sacrificing all of her wealth, risk his life and his family life to save 1,000 lives. He cried at the end of the movie that he could not save more. And as Ben Kingsley answered him in the movie, saving one life is like saving lives of everyone. I've been so touched by that movie. Most of the time watching it, I was just crying for this horrific, terrible, devastating acts against the human beings by the Nazi in that time. 6 million people, Jews, has been killed. But while watching it and seeing this horrific torturing and killing, genociding for these people, I could not ignore that there were another 34 million people died during that war. There were 40 million killed in the Second World War, beside another 15 million people killed in the First World War, beside millions of Red Indians and Native Americans killed in America, beside many other millions all over the world, in Africa, in India, North Africa, Hispanic, Chinese, Japanese. All of these people has been killed by white men. I'm sorry, this is nothing against you. But really, if you think it over, it's only by Europeans who led all of these genocides. What is really devastating, how would you see all of this? And specifically what happened, this specific genocide happened to the Jews during the Second World War. How would the world still accept to see similar acts happening to Palestinians? The Jews in that time has been pushed into ghettos, tortured, killed, slaved. In the same way, with other means, the same is happening for the Palestinians nowadays. Take Gaza as an example. Take also West Bank as an example. Took another 9 million Palestinians in the diaspora as an example. Gaza is so closed, like a complete ghetto. The Israelis, and if you look at the OCHA reports, they were calculating the calories intakes for the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza and allowing food items only carrying that calories intake per day. You can imagine that? Look at OCHA reports. And still, until today, they're killing us not by gas ovens, not by guns, but in many other ways. You know, I mentioned this movie just to show you, and if you saw it, how it really raised awareness of the whole world toward this unacceptable humanitarian crime against one ethnicity. I hope and I want you, when you see such movies like La Vie est Belle, Life is Beautiful, Schindler's List, and many other movies raising awareness toward what happened to the Jews, just try to have a look on what is happening to the Palestinians now with the grandsons of those who suffered that massacres. I cannot just understand it. How would you grave your father and your great grandfather who suffered from this genocide, and you commit the same crimes against another nation? It's nonsense. I just cannot understand it. You know, seeing that movie make me believe more and more in my role as an intellectual, as a theater maker, that this is the best way to raise awareness all over the world. We used to do it. We used to go to Europe with theater, showing theater shows, reflecting our cause, talking about the checkpoints that we suffer at, talking about the wars against Gaza, talking about the children who cannot sleep because of the bombing, and talking about the confiscating of lands and water, arresting people with no reasons, only because they say no for occupation. Every year we were going to tour in Europe until they imposed this blockade, and now we cannot show it. So thanks to you, to Jonathan, who gave us from time to time the ability of a platform to meet people like you here. When we did War and Peace after the war of 2014 on Gaza, we met with many people from UK, from London and other places via social media or video conferences. They saw our play and we were able to interact with them. This is our way. I mean, I'm not going to carry a gun. I'm not a man of a gun to fight the occupation, but I will not stop. I will keep fighting. And my gun is my art, is my theater, is how my ability to tell you my story in order to make you make a stand and tell your government. Unfortunately, although the United Nations declared the Palestinians, or in the General Assembly, declared Palestine as a state, at least 130 countries recognized Palestine as a state, but not the European countries in the West, unfortunately, not America, of course, not Canada, and for sure not Australia. That's a shame. That's really a shame. The Palestinians accept, after 40 years of struggling, to lose 78% of their lands, to give it up to the Israelis, and to accept a state, a small state, in 21% of their origin land, and yet this land we cannot have it. Yet we are closed down. You know what? I will give you a little example of how we live. You know, I have a daughter who is now 19 years old. Jonathan was calling us to check on us during the war in 2014. Jonathan was asking Salma, how old are you, Salma? She said, I'm 3 wars old. Now she's 5 wars old. A girl of 13 years old realized that she lived through 13 years, 3 devastating wars on Gaza. She had to go to shelter. She had to stay alone at home under the bombing while her mom and dad are in their work in the humanitarian fields and so on. Only a few months ago, they bombed a building just nearby our building. We had to be in the basement. Doesn't know if we are going to survive or not. You can imagine to live through all of this in one life. Believe me, not even 10 lives is enough to go through one war. It is really killing you from inside. That's why I believe in theater, I believe in art, and that's why I bring this Schindler List, because it is really a great example of how you could move people to make a stand, to make a position against torture, against unjust. Thank you.
Jonathan, now, if he's still with us. Hello, Jonathan.
I'm certainly more than still with you. I'm very, very moved by what's been said this evening. I mean, I found Heba's contribution like a tidal wave of remembering and taking account of what actually has happened to the Palestinian people. I mean, although I live with it, one easily forgets. Well, one forgets. One doesn't see the dimensions and the immensity of what is happening and what has happened there. And similarly, with Mahmoud talking about the questions that actually are to do with the leadership and the political life of Jerusalem, and then hearing Jamal's story about his early experiences of the crucial importance of theatre in Gaza, and Hossam's deep and extraordinary speech about this importance of telling the story that we have to tell through the art that we have. I can't really add that much to what's been said, but I know there have been questions about our project, which we haven't actually talked about at all.
Sorry about that.
But that's okay. I mean, we can do if people wish us to. I think that's worth taking note. You know that we've been working together for more than 10 years over different phases of a project that has been to do with working with young people, giving a creative space for young people to imagine a different world in, to enact characters that are different from them, that create trust, that create a sense of creativity, that help to solve some of the problems that these young people in Gaza actually confront in their daily lives, but also to produce plays and to engage people in thinking through what the nature of human life is about. Because I think that with all that's been said about Palestinian culture, which is so important and so distinct and so specific, it's important that Palestinian culture is a part of world culture, that it's a human culture, that it's a variation on perhaps the human culture, but that Palestinians are producing in Gaza the work of Tolstoy and the work of Mrozek and the work of other artists. It's also an expansive and extensive view of what human culture can be that Palestinians play a part in. And what's inspired me about working with Hossam and Jamal is their extraordinary ingenuity. I mean, their anger, their passion, but their ingenuity. I mean, at the onset of the second Intifada in 2000, they turned their skills as theatre makers towards therapy and towards working with young people to create the kind of spaces that I described earlier on. And that was something that we backed and we shared and we tried to generate and we fostered all along the line. At each turn of the drama that we've been through together over the past 10 years, I've learned such an enormous amount about humanity, about resilience, about creativity, about friendship from these people. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And that's the nature of our project. And when Hossam phoned me up in August 2018 and said they've bombed the theatre, they've destroyed the theatre, that was the theatre that we performed War and Peace in. We decided to undertake a project to rebuild it, and it's great, the contribution that the Brighton and Hove and Palestine Solidarity campaign has made to that. That money that we collected is frozen, because as we were moving towards taking action and galvanizing the campaign and using the money that we collected, we were met with coronavirus. So we suspended activities on the film that we were going to make, that was going to be promoting arts in Gaza, and would show the variety of arts and show the need for a cultural centre, and the importance that the Al Mishal played at the centre of the culture in Gaza. And at a certain point, we decided to undertake a theatre production, because actually by doing the production, we can start to talk about the need for a cultural centre in Gaza, a new independent cultural centre in Gaza. It's the best possible way in which we can find to advocate for people participating in that rebuilding process, because by producing the play and connecting up other publics with it, we can actually generate support for real contact with people in Gaza. So that's all I have to say. I'm sure there will be questions, and I'm sure most of them.
If you allow me, Jonathan, I will say a little thing about the production itself and why we choose Slavomir Merzhek. You know, with after the war of 2014 in Gaza, with the tight closure over Gaza, with around 60% unemployment among young people in Gaza, people, and especially young people, are losing hope and they are living in despair. Thousands and thousands left Gaza for somewhere else to look for a better life, and unfortunately, hundreds lost their lives in the sea, in the road to reach West Europe. Nowadays, in Belgium only, there are around 30,000 young men from Gaza left Gaza for a better life, while unfortunately they did not find that better life. And we felt it's our responsibility to tell our people here that immigration going to Europe is not really the right solution, not really the salvation that they are looking for. The Slavomir Merzhek, he made it, he painted this in a very beautiful way in a piece of theater about two immigrants, one a political asylum and one worker looking for collecting some money to come back to his home, and how they're being there together. Immigrants are, their life is devastated, destroyed, they lost their future, they lost their sense of being a human while not knowing it. Step by step, they realized they just lost their lives there. We felt our responsibility to bring this awareness to our young people. If you make a survey in Gaza Strip on who would like to leave Gaza, at least 80%, all ages will say, yes, I want to leave. And they have their reasons, and I can understand. I am one of them. I want to leave. But I know awarely that this is not really the solution. The solution is to stand still and to fight occupation and to seek the support of people such like you to find the solution of being liberated eventually, hopefully. So this is what we aim and what we hope to do, to produce soon. And yeah, that's all what I want to say about it.
Thank you, Hossam, for that, and thank you, Jonathan, for your comments as well, and to Jamal. All very moving and inspiring. And in fact, Hossam, you've actually answered one of the first questions that's come through. In fact, one of our members sent in advance to explain why the emigrants had been chosen as the focus for the production. You've answered that question very clearly and movingly. So thank you very much for that. A few questions have come in. I see that it's about 10 to 8, so we've got a bit of time for questions, and quite a few were sent to us in advance. One for Heba, which I think you're probably asked a lot, and that is, to many of us who have devoted a lot of time and energy to the Palestinian people, it's slightly puzzling to discover the Palestinian love of Western classical music, and we'd be interested to know what your own analysis of that is. And of course, it doesn't. We've also heard some fantastic Palestinian music by Palestinian musicians here in Brighton. But if you had some answer to that question, I think quite a few people here in the UK are perhaps puzzled by that. Heba.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's a good question. Very good question. Thank you. Well, I think first of all, if you love your own music and you're rooted in your own music, this opens you up to other people's music. I think it's the love of music itself that opens you up to, all kinds of music. And Palestinians love not just classical Western music, they love jazz, rap. I've seen a fantastic young artist in Gaza, actually. He's probably just even 11 years old, one of the best rappers. So it's jazz, classical, Arabic, lots of. But if we want to think about the history, let's say, if we want to look how classical music developed in Palestine, well, I would say that also, like literature and other parts of culture, we are a mix of different secular and religious backgrounds. So I'm sure, of course, that music can come from very far, perhaps even from Byzantine time or even the Crusade, or who knows, certainly through the Ottoman Empire, and also developed maybe mainly during the British Mandate, if we want to think about how it's developed in stages through its history. Definitely, I would say also that we had, if we look, it would be very good research to undertake. There are documents such as the journals of Wasif Jawhariyi. He was born 1890s. And he was a musician himself, and he wrote a lot about music and the development of classical music. There was also a very renowned organist, composer, and teacher of music, Augustine Lama. That was I think he was born in 1900 something, and he studied music at the hands of the Franciscans, actually. Definitely, we have to think about Salvador Arnita. Salvador Arnita, he also started playing the organ, I think, at the age of 11. He was a composer, a teacher, a conductor, and he taught music at Birzeit College. And he was a figure of classical music development, and he even led the music department at the AUB in Lebanon. That's after 1948, with his wife Yusra Jawhariyi, who's the daughter, I think, of Wasif Jawhariyi. And she was a musicologist, and she also taught at the AUB in Lebanon. So, these are big figures of music in classical music in Palestine, but lots of students have studied with them. Surely we can think also about the radio coming into the life of Palestinians, and the gramophone, and certainly under the British Mandate, we will think about the Palestine broadcasting services. And I'm sure there must be lots of archives there. It would be very interesting to do some research on this. There are other very important names that we can think of who were really developing and teaching classical music. We think, for instance, of Yusuf Batrouni, who was also a student of Augustine Lama. He was versed in Arabic music as well as Western classical music. He taught music and he taught music theory. He composed songs. He conducted school choirs. There's also a young Palestinian violinist, Amin Majaj. He was 16 years old when he formed his own musical ensemble. I think the fact that Toscanini visited Palestine in the 1930s also, I'm sure made some huge impact. And also, you know, there are families in Palestine who took on music, like, let's say, the Rahbanis in Lebanon, but we have the Flayflays, you know, or the Bawashis also. These are families who've really developed. And of course, we have to think about the Armenian music. My music teacher was Armenian, and the Hana Khachaturian, and you know, these are the names of Palestinian Armenians also. And of course, we have to think now more recently with Rima, Nasser, Salwa, Tabri, Nadia Mikhail, Tanya Tamari. So the tradition is there and continues. Thank you for showing interest.
Before we leave you, Heba, I think that Mahmoud has a comment on your comments. So could we bring Mahmoud in, please?
Yeah, sure.
If I may, I think it's one of the injustices that has been done to the Palestinians is the portrayal of the Palestinians as either just refugees for the last 600 years or other, you know, people just sitting on the deserts, although there's nothing really wrong with sitting on the deserts. And there was no real imagination of how the Palestinian society and the development of that society was before 48, which was lost and was destroyed as a result. Palestine and the main cities in Palestine, Jaffa, Palestine, and other cities, and Haifa, and so Nazareth, was actually a hub for culture in the Middle East. And people have intertwined and people have mingled among other other Arab artists. Kulthum, for example, the famous Egyptian singer, who also use European musical instruments, have actually played also several times in the Palestinian cities. So you know, I appreciate the question, but it's also, there's something about it that's inconvenient. That it's like, oh, why do we know European music? Because we should just do oud and that's it. Well, we are just normal people, and we had a very rich culture before 48, and that's actually part of the pain, the loss of that culture in the Palestinian life. I know it's not intended of the questions, but I think it's very important. It's very important to always mention the level of sophistication that was on the Palestinian society before 48. I will mention an example here from Jerusalem. Hind Husseini, who is, many of you will know her school and her cultural center in Jerusalem. She brought 11 orphans from Deir Yassin massacre girls, 11 of them from Deir Yassin massacres to her house, and then later she started an orphan house. She actually taught them piano, and the piano still exists. I mean, that, you know, not just that she rescued 11 kids and she called them her own daughters, she also taught them piano in addition to writing and speaking and of course many languages as well. And Heba mentioned a few figures, but actually it's just a testimony of the richness of the Palestinian culture before 48, and I thought I just want to highlight that.
Very important reminder, and I'm sure the questioner will have noted both your comments with great interest. We've got probably more questions than we have time for, and I apologize for that, but I see that there has been a question and answer between Patricia and Hossam in the chat, but I think it's important that we perhaps acknowledge that. I mean, Patricia says in the chat how sorry she was to hear of Hossam's pain. Do you see hope in the growth of social media, for example, platforms like Zoom, which can help people in the West to connect with people like you, even if you don't leave Gaza, and that she's looking forward to connecting more with Palestinian culture? Hossam, you have answered that briefly in the chat, but I wonder if you'd just like to make a few comments to everyone via your video link. If we could bring Hossam in.
I want to add much more than what I wrote. Actually, we just live with the hope. Without hope, we just die and give up, and that's it. So yes, it is so gloomy. especially with this, I don't know what to call him, this Trump and all of what's happening now with Arab countries recognizing Israel and even breaking the international law by importing products produced inside settlements, which it is, according to the international law, is illegal. Yesterday, the United States is making agreements in partnership with education activities inside settlements, which it is also against the international law. Yet, with all of this gloomy picture, we still have the hope, and we will keep the hope. We cannot live without it. And believe me, finding people like you, communicating with people like you, is feeding this hope. So thank you for being with us, and we promise you we will never give up, and we will always keep the hope. Thanks for you. Thank you.
We won't give up the hope either, Hossam, I promise you. I think we've got Umit from the Euromed Center has posted a question here, which is for Heba, and we may have to finish on this one. Umit says, greetings from Brighton. Have you already approached local community radio stations across the world to host the tunes, your music? We play Palestinian music regularly on our community radio show for over a decade now, and in our experience, listeners volunteer to publicize the music they hear on community media more widely than what they come across on commercial media. Heba, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's fantastic to know that. Thank you very much. And please stay in touch with us. You know, our website is www.palmusic.org.uk, and we are on social media. We are on Instagram. So please follow us and stay connected with us. That'd be fantastic if you could relay the music that we're putting out straight from Gaza, from all parts of Palestine, and from the diaspora. And if you can continue promoting this, it'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Can I finish with one little thing, if you allow me?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just again about Schindler's List. The Israelis, they realize the power of art. This is how they succeed to raise awareness toward the Holocaust, where every single person on earth very aware of it, because they know the power of art. They are attacking our art. They are undermining our ability to produce art because they know it. And one little thing, I just want the Jews and the Israelis to imagine every Jews resisted the Nazis was called a terrorist and anti-Aryan race at that time. They're just doing the same to us. We are resisting their occupation, and they are calling us anti-Semitism and terrorists. Thank you.
I'm going to put one final question, and I would just like a brief response from all of you, if you don't mind. You will know that the cultural boycott of Israel is an essential element of the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, international BDS movement. Here in Brighton, we've played a small, but we hope significant part in that boycott campaign. Is the cultural boycott by international activists, international solidarity activists, important? Is it effective? And what more should we be doing to raise awareness about to use that tool, that non-violent tool of resistance on an international scale? Mahmoud, could we turn to you?
Yes, may I remind your audiences, I'm from Jerusalem, and it's technically illegal to publicly support BDS in this democratic state. So I shall keep it for your intelligence to decide where I'm standing on this. But may I remind everyone that it is a technique. It's not the end goal. So, and we should be smarter. We should first, on all issues of boycott, by the way, not just the cultural boycott. I think we should we should own the movement. It should come from within. It shouldn't come from above or from the roof. It should be really coming from within. And if it comes from the heart and from the mind, then it is a conviction, and it is something that you can always hit the right mark correctly every time. And you don't need a set of criteria, or you don't need doctrinations, and you don't need a framework to tell you you should or you should not. I am on the question of BDS, I really ask people to bring it in from within to see their situation, the case itself, to measure the possibilities, what is better than others, what works better than others, and not just to be, I'm not orthodox in anything. And I would also ask people not to be orthodox on that either. And I don't want to be misunderstood here, but I think it is very important as a tool to be applied as a tool, and not to be an order that you just follow it without knowing. Because one day, I believe people in this part of the world gonna live side by side. On what sort of system it is, what side of political institution, what the colors of the flag are, is something we don't know yet. But we are gonna work together. We're gonna be in the same factories, we're gonna be in the same streets, we're gonna be in the same swimming pool, and we're gonna be in the same schools. So we need to apply this tool as a tool rather than just as a religion that's coming somewhere from the roof. The fact is that Israel is boycotting all of us, the Palestinians, and especially those who work in the culture. So it's a question also to be put to the Israelis to also question their boycott of us.
Jonathan, do you have any thoughts to contribute?
Yes, I do. I think it's. I think until Israel obeys international law, and until it conforms to the proper behaviour and human behaviour towards people, I think it's absolutely right that we should boycott and divest and create sanctions against Israel. I think it's a very important way of people on the ground being active in their support of Palestinian rights. And so I think it's very, very important. Having said that, I do agree with what Mahmoud has said, and I think it's very important that it's not the only thing, but I do think it's a very, very important tool at our disposal, and it's something that people can be active within. Boycott's always a little bit negative, perhaps, but I think that everybody that can be involved in that can be involved in it, and also be involved in creating positive relationships with Palestinian society and culture.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hossam, any thoughts on that question?
I think totally agree with the PDS, but also not forgetting what has been mentioned by Mahmoud, that this is not the goal. This is a tool, and it should really come from within. I mean, we are able to reach you, but somebody, and it is not us because we are unable, must reach the Israeli voices inside. The Israelis are led also by, I want to believe that they are a human being, and they are, of course, and I want to believe that they could realize what is right and wrong, but they are misled by their media and their government that they are only fighting terrorism, and they should know the reality. They should know what is happening. Ilan Pape books is one great example of raising awareness on the Israeli community on the crimes that their fathers and grandfathers committed and are still committing until today. So yes, it should come from within as well.
Thank you. And finally, Jamal, any thoughts from you on that question before we finish?
Yes, I was putting the mic, sorry. I do agree with what Hossam and Mahmoud said. I will not repeat it, but I would like just to say that Israelis, I mean, the occupation is raping our land, our time, our history, and everything. And they want us not to say no. And they want us even to show that we like it. This is impossible. We have the right to resist in the way that we want, the way that we can. And the culture is our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. I said at the start that we would try to finish as soon after 8 o'clock UK time as possible. It's now nearly 1:15, so I'm going to bring the meeting to a close. I'm sorry that we haven't had time for all the questions that have been put to us, but I hope you'll agree with me that it's been quite a remarkable and inspiring couple of hours. I want, on behalf of all the participants tonight and Brighton and Hove Palestine Solidarity Campaign, to thank our speakers, Heba and Mahmoud and Hossam, Jamal, Jonathan, most sincerely for their insights and their wisdom and for their activism. Thanks to all of you for joining us from points around the world, I'm pleased to say. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we will publicize the next Brighton-Palestine Connect meeting, which will be in late November, as soon as we've finalized the details. Everyone on mute, and can I ask for a round of applause for our fantastic speakers?
Thank you.